Lav, we've heard the CEO of LIV Golf, Scott O'Neill, say he's an acquaintance of Brian Roloff's. He's also said recently that he believes that LIV will own the game outside of the United States and that the PGA Tour will remain the dominant domestic force. So you at least have to admire his confidence in the absence of any evidence. Yesterday, Joaquin Niemann won again in England. He's had a handful of wins this year, but every time he steps out of the LIV ecosystem into a deeper field, he's a non-factor. He's been utterly irrelevant in the major championships this year. At a certain point, does it become problematic for either Niemann or for LIV that he's not being tested to the extent that he ought to be to become the player that he should be, or that LIV's best player simply can't cut it among a deeper field?
Yeah, I think it's probably more an issue for Joaquin Niemann to address than LIV Golf. And Rex and I tried to sort of advance this topic on the podcast last night. We don't really have a simple answer for the discrepancy of how this guy can win 5 times in 11 starts on LIV this year and only backdoor a top 10, his first top 10 in a major championship at the PGA. Otherwise, as you mentioned, he was sort of listless. He was pedestrian. I think some context is probably warranted here, is that we have seen players, at least on the PGA Tour, who have been very good on a week-to-week basis, who then had trouble translating that to major championships. Luke Donald, the former world #1, comes to mind. Billy Horschel, who at least until last year at Troon, his major championship record was really poor. Russell Henley has not seriously contended for a major championship. Max Homa, at least for a period of time in his career, had trouble on the biggest stages. And so there's certainly an adjustment period that Joaquin Niemann is trying to make. I think when you look physically at what he's trying to do, he certainly drives it better on LIV than he does in the major championships. There was a lot of talk about his iron play. Potentially his low ball flight was a detriment. He's actually improved that. You look at statistically, he was much better in the majors in 2025. Doesn't putt it as well. But I think it's more of a mental thing, guys, at this point. He's trying to show patience, trying to take the big picture, knowing when he shows up to the major championship, everyone is going to be looking at him and sort of waving the flag for LIV Golf. Can he put all of that aside and sort of summon his best golf? He's yet to do it to this point in his career, but I think we can all agree he's a top 10 player in the world, one of the most talented that we have. He's going to figure it out eventually.
You really think he's a top 10 player in the world, Lav?
Data Golf says as much. I think the eye test says as much. I mean, he was a multiple-time winner on the PGA Tour before he jumped to LIV. He's playing better golf than he did even when he won at Greensboro, even when he won at Riviera, when he lost in 2 playoffs on the PGA Tour as well. He is a very talented player who is still very much sort of the prime years of his career. I have no doubt that Joaquin Niemann is a top 10 player in the world. Again, he just needs to show it against all of the best players in the world, not just some of them.
Well, what do you think then, Rex? Is it mental, or is it the fact that they're not getting the Torrey Pines, TPC Sawgrass, Muirfield Village Memorial Tournament reps before major championships, not to mention a 4th round of golf week to week?
I think it might be reps, and I think it also might be venues. I just want to address the question that Lav clearly didn't answer that Eamon asked him. Is he a top 10 player? Yes, in Data Golf. And I think Data Golf has become the default because it's the only entity that tries to bridge the gap between the two tours. However, I would say the discrepancy in the majors, and just not this year, of the 26 majors that Joaquin has played, he only has 1 top 10 and 9 miscuts, including at the Open and the U.S. Open this year. So I would argue almost the opposite of that even though he's 9th, I don't think his record in the majors suggests he is a top 10 player in the world. But to your question, Damon, I think there's something to be said for venues, because if you look at his strokes gained data in those events on LIV Golf, he's just through the roof. He's picking up so many strokes on the rest of the field, and then you sort of spin that around and look at his strokes gained data at the major championships. His tee to green, his ball striking, it's simply awful. I don't think he's being tested regularly enough on a day-to-day basis to prepare himself for those biggest events.
Lav, I want to dip down into the minor league tours for a moment. There was an interesting scenario on the Corn Ferry Tour last weekend when Dan Masello made his Corn Ferry Tour debut. He is actually a professional golfer, apparently, but he's also a Corn Ferry employee. He shot 91 on a sponsor's exemption and then withdrew. And I've always tended to think that sponsors have and should be given a certain latitude in terms of their ability to draw attention to their tournaments. Have we gotten to a farcical level here where a company employee gets a spot in a tournament where guys are out there trying to make a living, shoots 91 and then withdraws?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand the financial realities, and there's probably a cost-benefit analysis that went on here of trying to appease an umbrella sponsor of a tour that has $1 million purses for golf's minor leagues. But optically, ideally, this is the sort of stuff that you're weeding out. College golf has never been better or deeper than it is right now. Like, there are literally dozens of players who just graduated from college or left early who could make a name for themselves and have plenty of potential staying power if given the opportunity. There's so many closing avenues to golf at the elite level. You hate to see a spot like this, particularly at this time of the season, occupied by a Korn Ferry executive. Again, I understand it. Doesn't mean I have to like it.
Well, Rex, as the PGA Tour continues with its fan-forward initiative, connecting with fans, I've been impressed at the rollout of Happy Gilmore 2 with players like Morikawa and Zalatoris on their social media pages with the alligator. You got Scheffler doing things at the premiere. First of all, what do you think of the movie and kind of the buy-in that the tour players have given to this rollout?
I think I had such low expectations, and that's probably not fair because Adam Sandler has done some really impressive work over the course of his career, and I'm a man of a certain age, so obviously the first movie was very special to me, but it doesn't seem like Netflix really has any interest in creating good content. So I didn't have very high expectations, if I'm being honest, and I was blown away. I watched it with my sons. We all laughed out loud. We all appreciated all of the cameos, which I think there were about 50 million of them. I think we appreciated some of the one-liners, but to your point, I think it showed a level of personality from some tour players that we've never seen before. They're not actors. They're athletes, so they're not great performances, but they're better performances than I think I anticipated. Scotty Scheffler being at the top of the list. I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but he had some funny lines about a possible arrest situation. So you get an idea of where this movie was going, and I did appreciate it. I know that it's become a bit polarizing when you look at social media. Either you love it or you hate it, but I thought they did a very good job of doing something that could have been clunky and sort of uncomfortable.
Lav, you seem like the demographic for this kind of movie. Have you seen it yet with your kids?
I have not. In fact, I was going to see it on Saturday. I ended up watching the OG version with my son, who's 6 years old. And his biggest takeaway was that he liked it, but he also learned several new curse words. So I'm not sure if he'll be watching the sequel. I will certainly be diving in, though, this week to get a full report next week.
You should probably keep your son away from me if you don't want him learning any new such words like that. Lav, this is interesting. We're talking about a movie here. We're not even in August. We're about to play the last major championship of stature this season with the AIG Women's Open. Rex, does the schedule need some kind of adjustment when here we are in the height of summer? And yes, we've got the playoffs coming up, but all of those defining major championship events have wrapped up by the time we get to the end of July.
I will say I always give the tour credit for condensing the schedule, or at least getting out of the shadow of NFL and college football, because you're never going to win that battle. So coming up with a way to finish up the tour championship before those seasons start, I thought was always a very good idea. But to your point, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that the LPGA Tour and the PGA Tour champions have decided to also sort of follow the same suit. I don't know that necessarily the audiences for those two are still football audiences. I'm not sure if it would be a terrible idea if they didn't extend the season a little bit and play some majors outside of what has become the traditional window. You're still not going to win against football. It's still going to be a limited audience of people who just really like golf, but I think it'd be a great idea.
Well, Lav, as we sit here on the eve of the final regular season event of the PGA Tour season, the Wyndham Championship, 70 spots in the playoffs available. I'm curious, from your perspective, having covered this season, has it seemed more sober, more serious, more at stake, more jeopardy involved than maybe past seasons with larger players and larger fields making it into the playoffs?
Yes, and I think that's a good thing. I think any move that you can make to make it more competitive, to make it more cutthroat, I think is ultimately going to be more compelling for the audience. I actually think the 3M was a perfect example of this. When you look at sort of the top 13 players on the final leaderboard, 8 of them were outside the top 100 in the FedEx Cup standings. It never ceases to amaze me how these guys can summon the goods when they seemingly haven't done much of anything over the past couple of months. And now I think when you have these different checkpoints and these different barometers for where you sort of are with professional status, whether it's the top 100 to secure your playing privileges, the top 70 to get to the playoffs, the top 50 to get to the signature events for 2026, the top 30 to get to the Tour Championship and sort of set your schedule that way as well. I think there's something for everyone. Again, this is really geeky. You really have to love the game like all four of us on this roundtable do. But I do think that in particular, these late season schedule events really hit the mark. I think they're more significant. They're more impactful. I think that's going to translate to audiences as well.
Do you sense, Rex, that any of the guys out there are more reconciled to this new system than they were certainly at the start of the year when it was announced? It wasn't exactly a popular thing. Is Brian Rolap going to hear about this on his listening tour?
I'm sure he's already heard about it. At the Travel Championship, when he introduced himself, he spent a lot of time walking up and down the range, and I'm sure he got an earful of it. I don't know if they've come to terms with it, but it is reality. You have to address the world the way it is, not the way you want it to be, so players understand it. And to Lav's point, I think it actually is good for the product. It has created a much more compelling finish. Look at the field this week at the Wyndham Championship. I spoke with Mark Brazel a few weeks ago at the Scottish Open. It's the best field he's ever had in Greensboro, and it has everything to do with the fact that now these numbers have been condensed, all of them, 125 to 100, 70, 50. Players know what they have to do at this time of year, and they're going to press. They're going to do things that they probably wouldn't do, and that's playing a few weeks in a row, playing events they wouldn't play otherwise. I do think that's a good thing. I think you're taking away playing opportunities. That's a different conversation, but certainly it's created a better product.